As we prepared for the final assault on the coastal city, we looked at our two angels that seemed to shimmer in the morning sunlight. Their white hair seemed to almost flow as though small wings. The armor that they never removed shimmered with the little bit that was not covered with dark hairy blood. As beautiful as the sight was, we all went in with a little trepidation. Were we going to free this continent just to be under the yoke of the Empire? Didn't we leave them? But it wouldn't matter if we did not clear this planet, because the Dark Harry would eventually simply rebuild, rearm, and assault us again. So we did not have a choice but to finish this fight. As one of the angels raised her sword, she screamed for the Emperor's name, which was met by silence. They both looked at us confused, and I raised my weapon, and I screamed to the heavens, "For our families, for our homes, and for those that these demons have taken from us, charge!" And with that, everyone ran, even past the angels, as they looked almost confused at us running past. At full sprint, we charged over the hill. They seemed to be in complete awe at the idea that anyone would fight for something other than the Emperor. But this hesitation only lasted a few seconds as we started receiving fire from some of the buildings, and we charged en masse into the maw of death. As we fired back into whatever opening we saw, it didn't matter if it was a window, a door, or anything else like that. Artillery flew over our head as air support began to whip by and launch all sorts of ordnance. We charged into the buildings and cleared them one by one with mechanical precision. The angels took point. They always pushed forward. We could never tell them to hold back and wait at a phase line. They continued to push forward, never stopping, seeming to be in a blind rage as they wanted to kill any Dark Harry they found. It didn't matter, old, young, it didn't matter. They all fell under the angel's sword. But the Dark Harry, as stated before, were backed up against the wall. We did not know this, but the Dark Harry can't swim at all. They sink. And since they had no vessels to take them across the vast oceans, they didn't have a choice but to stand and fight, and a cornered animal that is forced to fight will fight with unholy abandon, and that is what they did. The battle itself turned into a massive melee. As bolters were firing, blades clashed, whips flailed about in all different directions. It got so bad that the Dark Harry began even using their claws and their teeth, their massive size, as they began to crash into us, force us down, and try to aim for the weaker spots in our armor. And we would laugh as they would slash and then realize, only for a moment, that our armor was not what they were used to facing. And that moment later, one of our comrades would simply blow multiple holes through the Dark Harry, and we would watch it fall like some massive tree as it fell backwards. I was covered in blood by the time we got halfway through the city. It took us the entire day, but we couldn't stop because the angels wouldn't stop. The angels continued to push towards the port area being the last area that they could hold up. It was too heavy fortified a building to be taken down by simple airstrikes. Artillery would work, but we would burn through ordnance for days to crumple even a single building. And that is when we faced them. The Dark Harry had brought forth something massive, something I was not expecting, but it seemed as though they had mutated one of their kind to come at us. It came at us with unholy abandon, 4 arms flailing about, what I could see at least 3 limbs on the base, holding it up, trotting it forward in a strange manner as it flailed at them. The angels ran at this thing, and I watched in horror as it flung them off to the side, both of them going in opposite directions, and without hesitation, it locked on one of them and charged down. The angel held up her massive sword as her bolter had flung out of her hand. She was able to block one of the blades, but another one plunged deep into her abdomen. So deep, in fact, that the blade stuck into the ground. She screamed in pain, in agony, and in rage. And in that moment, everything stopped. At that moment, everyone's mind that had seen that had sped up to a degree that we did not know was possible. And at that moment, the call came out, the one we were dreading would ever be sent out. They started screaming, "Fallen angel! Fallen angel!" Everyone looked at their video feed. They clicked it on, and they saw one of our angels slowly seeming to lose consciousness as she began to fade down, almost unable to hold her massive sword up anymore as the blade from the other hand kept closer and closer to her face. And that is when something instinctual came up into all of us. Something in us men, our protector instinct, something that we had only known a little bit of. But we could not sit and watch this beautiful angel be sliced in half slowly in front of our eyes. Jumping from cover, everyone came out, all guns blazing as they laid into this massive beast. The beast turned to us and tried to draw its sword back out of the ground, but was unable to as multiple small bolter hits began to crash into it. It wasn't long before one of our men pulled out his shoulder-fired bolter. This one was 3 times the size of a standard bolter and fired straight into the beast standing in front of us. The bolter itself only grazed it, but it was enough to rip off one of its arms. It began to flail in pain, and the rest of us jumped on top of it, holding it down, while others grabbed whatever blades they could to jab into it, firing multiple bolters into its face, into its chest, until it finally stopped moving. We didn't understand at that point that we had been fired upon the entire time. I looked over and realized I had taken 2 hits, one in the leg, one in the side, and as blood poured from my armor, I turned, but I couldn't feel anything. Nothing but sheer rage. The other angel screamed out to her sister to see if she was okay, but we didn't even hesitate to charge the enemy lines. The medics began to swarm over the fallen angel, and I only remember a few minutes later, as I began to lose consciousness from lack of blood, how we had stormed through the building and cut through every one of the Dark Harry. It didn't matter if they were even begging for mercy. We had reached our limit. And as I went back towards the 3rd floor, I looked out the window and I could see them cutting the sword from the ground. The Dark Harry blade was not nearly as strong as the Angel's blade. However, it was enough to do the job. And I saw the body slump as the blade was finally cut, and they loaded her onto a transport. They didn't cover her with a sheet, so I knew there was a bonus. It was about that time one of my own subordinates, "Look, are you okay?" I simply looked at him. "I don't think so. I think I might have got clipped." And then the world went dark on me. I woke up in the Mobile Army's surgical hospital. They had put me back together, and thankfully somebody had some extra blood I could use, as I was running way low on it. As they loaded me up on a transport, I could see that the Angel had also been taken. She was on a massive stretcher and put on her own transport. The blade had been removed from her abdomen, and she had been bandaged up. But they were in a massive rush to get her back and put her in one of the tanks. We knew the tank couldn't hold many more than just her. Normally it's enough where you could put 3 or 4 of us in. But they wanted to keep the Angel alive. Out in the distance, I didn't hear any more weapons fire. Looking around, I didn't see any more massive movements. The battle must have been over, and I was grateful for it. I would gain consciousness 2 or 3 more times as we would travel back to our home planet. As I was being brought out of the ambulance, I looked over and I could hear people talking about the angel and how they had finally got her into the tank. She was alive, but barely. She was in some sort of coma the docs couldn't understand. But I didn't care. I just needed some time. To my surprise, those back home had been busy. They had created other tanks, the tanks to drop us into to make us heal. I was amazed that my injuries healed in less than 16 hours, and I was back into fighting shape. I immediately went back, got my armor, got my gear, and was back on the line, looking at our one angel as she looked across the ocean. But she was not looking over the ocean with pride, no. I could see her holding her head down. She was worried. She was worried for her sister. I walked up next to her, and I realized something strange. They had done something to me in the tank. Either the angel had shrunk, or I had gotten slightly taller. It didn't matter. I walked up, tapped her on the shoulder to let her know I was there, and then simply stated, "Don't worry, they'll take really good care of her." She didn't even look at me, but I could see the concern for her sister in her eyes. Turning to look out in the ocean, I simply stated to her, "Don't worry, Angel. We'll take really good care of your family. You're one of us now, after all."